Manx Radio's Update with Beth Espey.
Well, Fastenmai, good evening. Welcome to Monday's update here on Manx Radio. All the news in the next half hour, including a passenger on yesterday's Liverpool flight that was forced to turn back, describing the growing disruption to the island's connectivity as disgusting. We'll hear what happened and why. Also tonight, as the UK sees a rise in hospital admissions due to flu and Manx Care urges people to wear masks in certain settings, we'll bring you the latest advice about that. And MHK is questioning why large publicly owned companies funded by taxpayers shouldn't be subject to FOI laws. And for the first time on the island, an online disability awareness training programme is now available. All that, the weather, the traffic and the travel as well. And if you'd like to get in touch, you can email studio@manxradio.com. We'll start with a roundup of the main news headlines with Lewis. First of all, Fastenmai.
Senior leaders on the Isle of Man have met this afternoon to light a candle recognising the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. Chief Minister Alfred Cannon, the Lieutenant Governor and the Lord Bishop attended a private ceremony alongside members of the Jewish community. Mr Cannon says today's arrangements had been in place for some time but take on extra significance following yesterday's tragic events in Sydney. He sent the Isle of Man government's deepest condolences to all those affected by the horrific attack. Anyone visiting Manx Care's clinical settings from today may be asked to wear a face mask as cases of flu and other respiratory illnesses rise. The healthcare provider says these measures help protect staff and patients during winter months when such viruses can be particularly severe. Consultant microbiologist Dr. Rizwan Khan says it's a simple yet sensible step.
Numbers have risen over the past week or so. So we are very aware of the situation, and this is one of the reasons that we have taken this step.
Ronaldsway Airport has issued an apology to passengers caught up in disruption yesterday due to the weather conditions. One flight from Liverpool landed at Ronaldsway, but passengers were unable to disembark due to the strong winds, preventing safe access for the aircraft stairs. And a note from the DOI, Patrick Road has reopened following an emergency road closure today. Work had been taking place to stabilise a section of roadside bank which slipped during Storm Bram last week. The latest international news, Rob Reiner's son Nick has been arrested after the Hollywood filmmaker and his wife Michelle were found dead at their home in Los Angeles. A homicide investigation's underway. The 78-year-old's best-known works include When Harry Met Sally and Stand By Me. Sir Keir Starmer has condemned strike action by resident doctors as irresponsible. A 5-day walkout in England's due to start as planned on Wednesday after members of the British Medical Association rejected a new government offer. And an exam board's been fined £2 million. Regulator Ofqual says Pearson breached standards in 3 separate cases from 2019 to 2023, affecting thousands of students. Those are the headlines. I'll be back with the news at 6.
Thanks very much, Lewis. Now the weather brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. So tonight it's going to be dry. There'll be clear spells, light winds, temperatures around 4 Celsius. Quite chilly at first tomorrow, but otherwise fine and dry. Plenty of sunshine, light winds as well, and top temperatures tomorrow around 10. And then rain developing overnight into Wednesday. The wind is going to strengthen, and Wednesday is going to be pretty bleak, to be honest. Wet, windy, outbreaks of rain, strong to gale force southwest winds. The rain will clear later in the day on Wednesday, and the wind will veer to the west and ease as well. Maximum temperatures around 12.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
TE Carbon provide new memorial stones, grave renovations, new inscriptions and fire hearths. Visit us at Hope Street, Castletown, or at Broadway, Douglas, or call 844 440. TE Carbon, here when you need us.
At Bond Fabrics, we're not just a fabric shop. As well as curtains and upholstery and dress and costume fabrics, we've knitting and crocheting wools, made-to-measure curtain and blind service, plus poles and tracks. Visit Strand Street, Douglas, call 611856 or see bondfabrics.in.
Most builders start with a hammer and saw. Manx Construction start with ideas and imagination. For new build, extension or home office, Manx Construction offer full service from planning to completion. Call Tony on 452 688.
If you have children, pets or a house, talk to Peace of Mind about a will or power of attorney, which will help family members when it matters. Prices from $199 plus VAT. Find us on Facebook or call 632 610.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
So we've been talking today about the EasyJet flight yesterday because it had to turn round and go back to Liverpool after it landed. Why? Well, because it was too windy to use the steps to disembark the plane. And this has prompted a wider discussion about the island's connectivity again. Now, Gary was on board that flight. He called Man in Line at lunchtime to share his experience and believes there's been a noticeable decline in services.
It was a bit of an ordeal, if I'm honest. EasyJet were fine, no problems there. The flight was on time. We landed, plenty of time. I think the Gatwick flight, the EasyJet Gatwick flight came in about 20 minutes before, no problems. We landed. Next thing, 15, 20 minutes later, the captain said, it's too windy for the stairs to come to the plane, so we're just going to wait for it to hopefully get a gap before they can come and sort it out. Another 20 minutes goes by, the captain updates us again saying still no joy. He's asked whether or not he could park somewhere else where it's less windy. The airport reluctantly said no, and then about 20 minutes later, we all got the bad news on the plane that we were flying back to Liverpool. So unfortunately, over the last 5 or 10 years, it's been awful, to be honest. The amount of flights that have either been cancelled with either delays or air traffic control, totally nothing to do with the airlines, but all to do with, unfortunately, infrastructure on the Isle of Man, whether it's at the sea terminal or whether it's in the airport. It's disgusting, to be honest. The Isle of Man government needs to take some responsibility. What I'm annoyed about is that there's been no recognition of failing transport links on and off the island. They really need to get a handle on it, get a full review of everything, because what it's doing, we're touting ourselves as an international business centre here on the Isle of Man. You know, how can we be an international business centre when our travel is on a shoestring? I fear that EasyJet may well pull the plug on the Isle of Man in the not too distant future if this keeps happening. They're the ones that are going to be losing the money out of all this. You know, and I understand if it's completely out of the question, but the flight was safe to land, take off. There was no worries about that. But to get some stairs to a plane, if a plane is safe to land, then there should be a way to get those people off that plane. If you can spend £100 million on a new sea terminal in Liverpool, but they can't actually get people off a plane in Ronaldsway because it's 2 miles an hour over the selected wind, it's ridiculous.
That's Gary, who is on Man in Line at lunchtime. So obviously we have approached all the relevant parties for comment, and Amy is with me now. So Amy, tell us what we've heard back so far.
Well, EasyJet responded to us first, and in a statement it says, due to strong winds on the Isle of Man yesterday evening, resulting in ground handling services being suspended, customers on flight EZY 517 from Liverpool were unable to disembark, and as the weather was not expected to improve, the flight returned to Liverpool and was cancelled. The safety and well-being of our customers and crew is EasyJet's highest priority, and we did all possible to minimise the impact of the weather for our customers, providing the option to rebook or receive a refund, as well as hotel accommodation and meals for those who needed them. While this was outside of our control, we are very sorry to customers for the inconvenience caused.
So that was EasyJet. We've also heard from the Department of Infrastructure, haven't we?
We have, and speaking on behalf of the Isle of Man Airport, which it operates, the DOI says due to strong and gusting winds, aircraft steps could not be safely deployed on some flights in line with established safety limits operated by the airport's ground handling provider, Menzies Aviation. These limits are in place to protect passengers while boarding and disembarking. The variable wind conditions meant that flights were affected differently. As a result, some services were cancelled or diverted, and in one case an aircraft landed safely, but passengers were unable to disembark, and the aircraft subsequently returned to its departure airport. Geoffrey Pugh, Interim Airport Director, says we sincerely apologise for the inconvenience caused to passengers as a result of yesterday's high winds. These were unusual circumstances and safety must always come first. While these measures are necessary to protect everyone at the airport, we understand the disruption this caused and appreciate the patience shown by those affected. The DOI says the airport continues to work closely with its service partners and operators to minimise disruption and ensure the highest standards of safety during adverse weather conditions.
Now, Amy, there has been some criticism about why the plane wasn't just moved or potentially why fire engines weren't deployed to act as a windbreak. What has the DOI had to say about that?
Well, it said that operational staff staff from its ground handling provider Menzies Aviation worked closely with airport teams to assess whether passengers could be safely disembarked. Given the prevailing wind conditions and operational constraints at the time, no safe option was available, and the aircraft was therefore required to return to its departure airport with passengers on board.
Amy, thank you so much. We should say we have contacted Menzies Aviation for a response as well, but are yet to hear back from them. It's just gone 5:10, so we are definitely entering the season for winter bugs. And starting today, Manx Care is now asking anyone visiting hospital or other clinical settings to think about wearing a face mask. The healthcare provider says these measures help protect staff and patients during winter months when flu and other such viruses can be particularly severe. We know the UK is seeing a huge rise in the number of flu cases. So Manx Care is asking those going to Nobles Hospital, especially when going into hospital wards, to follow staff guidance to help keep everyone safe. Lewis has been talking to consultant microbiologist Dr. Rizwan Khan.
We are seeing a seasonal rise in flu and other respiratory viral infections, which happens in most winters. Hospitals, we take care of people who are particularly vulnerable. So wearing masks in clinical areas is a simple yet a sensible step to reduce the risk of infection spreading and to protect our patients and staff.
And so anyone visiting the hospital, is it a mandatory step? Will they need to wear a mask?
It is not mandatory stuff, but then we would strongly encourage our visitors as well to wear masks. So visitors will be offered masks at the clinical area entrances. Visitors will be encouraged to wear a surgical mask, particularly when they are visiting a patient in a clinical area. And visitors with respiratory symptoms, we will discourage them to attend unless it is essential, because one of the key precautionary measures is if you are unwell with a likely respiratory tract infection, you stay away from the hospital just as a preventative measure.
And we know that over in England, cases of the flu are rising rapidly and have been doing so in recent weeks. How do we compare on the Isle of Man at the moment?
We are seeing cases of flu and other respiratory viral infections that require hospital care. And that, as you said, is consistent with what's being reported in the UK. And that is one of the reasons that we are taking early action to reduce further spread. This is expected in a flu season. That's why we are taking these timely precautionary measures. We have seen cases and the numbers have risen over the past week or so. So we are very aware of the situation, and this is one of the reasons that we have taken this step. Masks reduce spread of respiratory viruses, especially from people who don't yet feel unwell. This is a temporary but sensible precaution in clinical areas, and it helps protect our patients, staff, and also it keeps our services going. Alongside masks, we have to follow some basic infection control measures like rigorous hand hygiene, prompt isolation, encouraging people not to attend to work if they are acutely unwell, and follow basic respiratory etiquettes. And last but not the least, please go and get yourself vaccinated.
That's consultant microbiologist Dr. Rizwan Khan talking to Lewis there. Much more on this on Breakfast tomorrow morning. 5:13. Well, the suggestion that the Manx economy is struggling is more sentiment than actual evidence. That's according to the Chief Minister. This is after some backbenchers raised concerns about the state of the island's economy at this month's sitting of Tynwald. Now, while Alfred Cannon says there are reasons to be positive, he says he's working with Treasury and the Enterprise Minister to stimulate the economy.
I think there's more sentiment than there is actual evidence. We are particularly slow at getting the real data out, and so I really would like to see the latest data figures. We tend to be going back 2 years really to see these sorts of GMP and GDP figures, so I'd like to see much more up-to-date figures being brought forward. I am under no illusions personally that we are in quite a difficult period at the moment. I think there's going to be a lot of emphasis in terms of what the budget does in February, and I think I'm going to be clear with you, I am working with both ministers, the Treasury Minister and the Enterprise Minister, to understand how the economy needs to be stimulated at the moment and taken forward so that we can get some confidence back in both into business but also into the broader economic perceptions and sentiments that are clearly out there at the moment.
I guess you must be frustrated that you set off with a fairly clear vision as to what you wanted to see, and events have maybe conspired a little bit against you, but we don't appear to have had the significant economic growth that I think your government had hoped for when it set off just over 4 years ago.
Well, again, data on that is not right up to date, so it's hard for me to give you an accurate figure without just sort of making a perceived comment. But look, there is data though in terms of the numbers coming to the island, which is positive, the numbers of people in work, which is positive, the numbers of people unemployed, which remains incredibly low, which will give you a significant source of encouragement.
That's the Chief Minister Alfred Cannon talking to Phil Gaughan there.
Manx Radio Travel, serviced by Quayside Tyres.
Well, as Lewis mentioned in the headlines, the Patrick Road has now reopened. It was closed. There was emergency closure because of some damage after Storm Bram last week. Everything else to look out for, still those temporary lights on King Edward Road between Groudle and the Old Liverpool Arms. In Port St Mary, the closure of the High Street has been extended to the end of this week. That's between Park Road and Athol Place, where the road is one way. And in Ramsey, there are temporary lights on West Quay. That's near the swing bridge for demolition work. A couple of slight delays down at the airport, but nothing major. And then the Manx Minute is going to be in Douglas Harbour at 20 to 8 this evening. So that means the return sailing to Heysham is obviously going to be a little bit later. It's now going to go at 8:15.
Manx Radio Travel, serviced by Quayside Tyres. Call Quayside Tyres on 664417 to book your free vehicles winter check so your vehicle is safe for you and other road users.
It's coming up to 17 minutes past 5. So why wouldn't large publicly owned companies funded by the taxpayer be included in the Freedom of Information Act? Well, it's a view of an MHK who's been campaigning to have 3 public companies included in this legislation. Douglas Central member Chris Thomas gained support from MHKs for the Act to be amended to include all public owned companies, although a combined vote is going to be needed in January after MLCs voted against the move. Now, Chris Thomas's suggestion that Manx Radio be removed from the Act was defeated, although he told Phil Gaughan that suggestion was just a debating point.
We have some publicly owned companies which meet the definition for inclusion in the Freedom of Information Act. Government's position was that we were still reviewing whether they should be included or not, and I think Tim Wood today, although we've got subject to a combined vote, told government that they should be included. That's the Manx Development Corporation, Isle of Man Meats and the Steam Packet Company. Also, unusually, it was revealed that there will be an amendment to achieve what we've agreed. I hope we agree, or I move to achieve in Tynwald in the House of Keys, perhaps before we even have the combined vote in January. So you can amend the Freedom of Information Act along the lines that I moved for. I've been working with Mr Hooper on this for some months.
And what I suppose we should also add is Manx Radio weren't particularly looking to be removed from the Freedom of Information regime.
That's right. I just made the case that if they were included, why wouldn't larger companies with more causing more financial exposure to the Isle of Man government be included? I just used it as a debating point. That's
Douglas Central member Chris Thomas. You can hear much more about that in Agenda, which is coming up at 5:30 with Phil after this programme. 18 minutes past 5 now. So a former Douglas councillor wants to approach government for its support in introducing satellite visa facilitation services centres for the Isle of Man residents. Now this is as South Africans, Filipinos, Chinese and other nationalities on the island are required to apply for such a visa in order to travel to Europe. Frank Schungel is German. His wife has a Filipino passport, which means she would need to apply in the UK whenever they plan to go to Europe, something Frank has described as cumbersome. Manx Radio has been talking to other residents who said they'd also welcome a satellite service here.
The cost of travelling to the UK to get a visa, the cost of the visa and the cost of potentially getting an agent to get you an appointment is just outrageous. I mean, we've decided that we're not considering visiting Europe again.
There's a ranking system for passports called the Henley Passport Index, and the South African passport falls 51st on that list, meaning you can travel to 101 countries visa-free. None of them are the European Union. And that includes, let's take the Republic of Ireland. I can't just quickly jump on a plane or the ferry and go to a Christmas market in Ireland. I have to do a very long process to do that. I have to plan months in advance and try to get an appointment at a VFS. Now, granted, if we did have that sort of station here, those two steps won't change at all. But the things that will change, and I think that's a big barrier for most people to travel to, is the cost associated with getting that visa. That's for two people around £500. It would attract, I think, a lot more travel for the island. More people would be travelling off the island and coming back. So there's again that economy kind of thing where you're pushing money into flights.
My husband is an avid board game player, so we travel to Germany every year for one of the biggest board game festivals that happened in October. Logged on, and it was an entirely different interface, firstly. Nothing was available. I think I must have tried for about 8 months to 9 months solidly to try and get an appointment. I eventually got down to LinkedIn and pulled up every single human being that worked or was registered, and I mailed every single one of them saying, I live in an island, this is what's happening. And some of them responded. The response was, there's nothing we can do, you just need to log on it and then see if there's an appointment.
BLS and VFS offer an at-home service in the UK, which is £175 per person, per applicant. They're perfectly willing to come here at a cost of £1,085 per applicant. I was just doing some investigation myself. There's approximately 31 registered travel businesses here in the Isle of Man. So it's not like we won't be supporting local business. Could they just acknowledge the hardworking legal migrants and assist us? Having a decent holiday is good for all-round mental health.
Some residents there talking about the visa situation. We have contacted the Departments of Home Affairs, Treasury and Enterprise for comment. 21 minutes past 5. So if you have a disability or perhaps a loved one is disabled, then you'll likely know what a difference it makes when organisations take specialist awareness training. So over the past few months, there's been a collaborative effort between two organisations to create an online training course for volunteers and members of the Manx charity Sailing for the Disabled. Well, Lewis has been talking to Andy Hodkin from Disability Awareness and Carol Quayle, who's the CEO of Sailing for the Disabled, about the progress they've made.
There's lots more that needs to be done. In many ways, the Isle of Man is a really progressive nation in terms of inclusivity, in terms of the disabled community here, which I believe is more fully involved in society than other areas. And I think partly that's because it's a safer place to be. So it's a safer place for people with learning disabilities and neurodivergence in particular to be part of society. However, there's lots of things that can be improved. And I'm hopeful that developing an e-learning package like this might encourage other organisations to develop them themselves. So the one that we've done for Sailing for the Disabled is very specific to that organisation, but the messages that we have in that training are kind of universal in terms of approach. So we look at things like communication, we look at small areas like safeguarding, boundaries, consent, we look at things like supporting parents and carers. All of these things are universal in the sense in terms of how organisations, companies, charities can support people with disabilities. So the hope would be that people might see it, maybe have a go with it and think to themselves, oh, this is something that we could do, this is something that we could develop for ourselves. That would be a great thing that could happen, I think.
You were saying, do we think that there is room for improvement on the island? I just have a one-word answer to that, and that's always. My working background was in healthcare, so I have experience for most of my life with people with disabilities, and I can see there's been a massive improvement over a lot of years, but there's always further to go. At Sailing for the Disabled, we are mindful of this every time we go out sailing, every time that boat leaves the harbour, Douglas Harbour. Everything is continuously assessed because we have different sailors aboard every time. And all of this should be passing back into our Manx society. And it is, to a degree, but we can all work harder.
Yeah, I mean, one of the bigger concerns that the disabled community have is isolation, social isolation, loneliness at times. There are clubs and activities and services that are not particularly accessible to people with disabilities, which is why something like Sailing for the Disabled is so important, because it provides access to brilliant activities such as sailing that otherwise they probably wouldn't be able to access. So yeah, there is as you say, there's always room for improvement. We are going in the right direction. There's still a long way to go, but I think charities like Sailing for the Disabled are at the forefront of kind of promoting that change.
Andy Hodkin and Carol Quayle there. Now, FC Isle of Man manager Rick Holden said his side's 5-0 win over AFC Liverpool on Saturday could be a turning point in the season. He's been talking to the club's media.
It has been coming in terms of the 13 games. We have looked like very inside at times in the first half and then capitulated into draws or the odd last-minute defeat or equaliser. But we're a bit more measured last night, 1-0 at half-time. But yeah, they were excellent all the way through, and it was deserved 5-0 without a doubt. There's no point going in and saying you can't do this, you can't do that. What can we do? And I quickly worked out what they can do, and that's finding the positions to play in. Training's been excellent to be involved with, making them do, practice makes perfect, and we're doing lots and lots of that. And I do feel it's a happy place, so keep things positive. And yeah, you're right, I don't want to be worried about getting a point here and getting a point there. We want to go out and play some decent football. Some of those goals were great, and I want to mention that. They were really good goals, topped off at the end by a fantastic goal from Dino, and that's another thing they've been working on. And we might put half a dozen into the field down at Castletown like that, but the ball's gone wide, he's come back in, a nice little pass, bang, top corner, great stuff. So all positive. So yeah, and the way we played against Earlham, we were at 6 in the league, and other teams where we've got these draws and stuff and won away from them, we shouldn't really fear anyone. They should be fearing us, and we go out with that positive attitude. It's not job done by a long way. We've got a long way to go to improve things, but very satisfied with everything. And final note to the fans, and thanks for all the support.
FC Isle of Man manager Rick Holden there. The Ravens moved up to 19th in the North West Counties Football League table. They are 9 points now above the relegation zone. We're going to stay with sport and join Darren now. Faster my, Darren.
Faster my. Peel thrashed league leaders Corinthians 5-0 at the weekend to move within 4 points of their title rivals. Goals from Thomas Brown, Lee Gale, Matthew Woods and Jason Chalmers saw the Westerners run riot on home soil in the Canada Life Premier League. Meanwhile, Union Mills and Foxdale played out a 9-goal thriller, with the home side needing added time to win the game. Elsewhere, Russian, Ramsey and St Mary's all took 3 points. Onto the Arden and Dragon Division 2, where there are only 2 games played due to waterlogged pitches. Malou beat Governors 5-3, while St George's won away at Rycob. In the Canada Life Women's League, Peel had moved to first in the table after an 11-0 win over Russian, and Corinthians beat Onken 8-0 in the Floodlit Cup, with Malou also getting a win over Union Mills. On to rugby, where Regional 2 Northwest title chasers Douglas have lost for the second week in a row. It was another tightly contested match, with Sandbach winning by 2 points. Douglas now have moved to 4th in the table, but can go back to 2nd if they win their game in hand. Elsewhere, Vagabonds Ladies beat Aldwinians 10-0 in the Women's NC2 North, and Vagabonds and Ramsey's dreadful seasons continued with defeats at the weekend. And finally in hockey, Valkyries and Vikings have won the first cups of the mixed season. Chris Adam and Steve Cottier secured Valkyries B the mixed play final with a 2-0 win over Bacchus C. In the mixed ball final, Vikings D beat Castletown Canucks to the title. The game finished 1-1 after full-time whistle, but Vikings D claimed the trophy, winning 4-2 on flicks. Next week, Bacchus A and Castletown Celts will meet for the mixed cup final.
Thank you very much indeed, Darren. Well, that is pretty much all from Update this evening. Thank you very much for your company. As ever, all the details on tonight's top stories you can find on the Max Radio website. Also on social media as well, if you fancy having your say about any of them. Coming up next at 5:30, it is Agenda with Phil Gorn. He's going to be looking back at December Tynwald. There was quite a lot happening last week. That referendum on net zero, obviously, Stu Peters didn't get the go-ahead with that, but was that the right decision in your opinion? They also talked Manx produce and gas exploration as well. Then after that, Chris Kinney will be here with Greatest Hits at 6. At 9, it's time for Brass with Ian Cottier, and Dave will be with you with After Hours from 10. So whatever you're doing this evening, have a good one, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.